Meine ganze die karan thain tu chuk sorry.
Okay. Good. That's okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. On the behalf of UGC HRDC, University of Kashmir, and participants, I welcome Dr. Manzoor Ahmed Shah Sahab as the resourceful person for the 7th session of this refresher course in science. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Dr. Manzoor Ahmed Shah holds master's degree in botany and worked for his PhD jointly in the University Laval, Quebec, Canada, and University of Kashmir. He currently teaches as an associate professor at the Department of Botany, University of Kashmir, and has been a faculty affiliate at the University of Montana, USA, and a visiting professor at King Saud University, Riyadh. His basic research interests cut across various aspects of Himalayan biodiversity, such as freshwater ecosystem, plant invasion, biogeography, and plant-soil microbe interactions. He has published one book and 85 high-impact research papers and book chapters, in recognition of which he has been awarded several national and international fellowships and prestigious awards, such as Indo-US 21st Century Knowledge Initiative Award, formerly known as Obama Singh Award, DBT Crest Award 2012, Gold Medal from Indian Academy of Environmental Sciences, Priyavaran Mitra Eco-Friendly Award, the Canadian Commonwealth Exchange Program, Doctoral Award by the Canadian Geer. been principal investigator and coordinator of many national and international network projects, including an Indo-US, Indo-German, and Indo-Canadian project. Dr. Shah has traveled quite widely as an invited speaker at various scientific meetings and conferences within India and abroad, especially in the countries such as USA, Canada, Germany, Sweden, Hungary, Saudi Arabia, and France. So I will not take much time here. So I request Dr. Manzoor Ahmad Shah Sahab, let's start the presentation. Please, sir.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, the chairman of this session, for your nice introduction. And at the outset, I would like to thank the director, Human Resource Development Center, and especially the coordinator, Dr. Geer Saab, my friend as well, for having invited me to this refresher course to talk to the participants. And since morning, I think you have already had a talk which was kind of grounded in the ecology. And we will continue that discussion in a slightly different perspective in this talk. So it's always a pleasure when I talk to the colleagues from the university or from the colleges, be it from the Jammu and Kashmir or outside. We are, of course, at the same level, and the only difference is that we sit sometimes across tables. In that regard, it's always an opportunity for me to kind of learn as well as imbibe many things in addition to what I can offer you to basically learn. So when I thought about the topic that I should be discussing in this talk, I came to this, that this long-term ecological research is something that we quite often do not know much about. And most of the problems that we are facing right now, be it climate change, be it land use, land cover changes at the larger scale, be it biodiversity erosion or the biological invasions, be it disease outbreaks like pandemics as we are currently facing. And that is what actually barred us facing being there face to face, and we are unfortunately resorting to this different platform altogether. So I thought that long-term ecological research is something that cross-cuts all these important areas of urgent concern to us at the moment. And the fundamental question to start with is, and that is what basically would give you an outline of my talk. We would like to talk about, say, why do we need this long-term ecological research, right? And of course, what this long-term research actually is all about, right? And then how this long-term ecological research has contributed to the intellectual progress of ecology as a discipline or advancement of the environmental sciences as well. And then we will take a stock of this long-term ecological research in a Himalayan perspective. And while identifying the gaps, we will try to see what the way forward possibly is. Now, having said this, let me tell you at the outset that when we look at the long-term ecological research, what it is all about. We know that tracking historical changes is key to understanding the present and, of course, predicting the future. The question is here, how it is possible, right? If you look at the research that we have been doing in our individual capacity over the years, especially from an ecological perspective, say many people have worked on the Dal Lake so far, but we do not have a connecting thread between the studies that would tell us right now what has gone wrong in the Dal Lake so far. Despite huge investments by the government and otherwise, there is not much, visible change on the ground, right? Is it that we have failed to understand the ecosystem dynamics as such? Is it that our efforts of understanding Dal Lake as an ecosystem are not scientifically grounded, rather they are more engineering oriented, right? So my point is that in ecology, many things change over a long time scale, over a long period of time, right? So if we talk about, for instance, climate change is something which all of us know is a challenge that the world at the present has, and it is believed that this is the mother problem of many other changes that we are facing, many other issues that we are facing right now, right? But, okay, in the Kashmir Himalayan context, if we talk about the climate change, we cannot talk about the climate change until and unless we do not have the previous data. Now, how do we get that previous data, right? There are many approaches. For example, you go and do that ice core analysis and look at what was the concentration of carbon dioxide, say 20 years back, 30 years back, or 100 years back, or 500 years back for that matter, right? Or we look at the, say, dendrochronology, in terms of the growth rings of the trees. There are many approaches. I don't want to talk about them. The key point here is that until and unless we do not know what was there before, we cannot, in very scientific terms, talk about the change that has occurred over the period of time. Fine. So therefore, the central aim of this long-term ecological research programs is to understand these long-term patterns as well as processes of ecological systems at multiple spatial scales. The question of scale, you must understand, dear participants, is fundamental to the science of ecology. If we ask a question at a regional scale and ask the same question at the global scale, the answers could be entirely different, right? As for instance, we work in the area of biological invasions. At the local scale, it's said that, say, when the non-native species come into a different region, they enrich the species pool, which is already there. But when you look at a global scale, it looks that this invasion is causing the problem of biotic homogenization, right? So in that context, the outcomes are entirely different when you change the scale. Similarly, when you talk in terms of the temporal scale, for example, if we have data about the changes over a period of 1 year or 10 years or 100 years, when we look at the outcome of the data and its analysis and what it indicates, it's altogether different, right? And if you look at this point here, this scale at which we work varies, of course, and it depends upon the questions that we are asking. And we need to understand that every system is undergoing long-term changes, and that long-term changes can be only and only studied with the long-term measurements. So that means if we do not have these long-term measurements in place, our conclusions would not be robust, neither reliable, right? And these changes are not recognized by most of the people, because some of the changes occur at a time scale that is more than the lifespan of a routine, on an average human being, right? And this is something which was argued by Magnusson in 1990, and when he talked about the invisible present. But by that, he meant that time that we are actually, as of now, also causing certain changes, the impacts of which are not visible to us when we are living, but would be visible when we are gone and the other generations would be there, right? So long-term ecological research is basically about uncovering these hidden processes. As I said, because these hidden processes may occur either too slowly for us to monitor in our limited lifespan time, or their effects lag years behind the causes. Whatever are the causes of those problems, the effects, you can see after a long gap of time. So it was in this context that this long-term ecological research which provides a very valuable data set over the period of time, as well as the space, that enable us to test such hypotheses which help us understanding the drivers of ecosystem transformations over time very well. And actually, it started way back in 1980s in the United States, when the National Science Foundation, NSF, in 1980, I think, designated around 25 sites across different states of the US. And those sites would include forest ecosystems, deserts, agricultural ecosystems, freshwater ecosystems, marine ecosystems, grasslands, right? So, and each site would gather basically data on certain key parameters. And those parameters, when you monitor over a long period of time, they become sort of indicators, right? The parameters, for instance, were, say, the primary productivity, how does it change over time, right? The nutrient cycling, how does it change over time? The eutrophication process, how it happens over time, and this, how it leads to the process of succession, so on and so forth, right? Spatial and temporal, changes in the distribution, disturbance regimes, right? I mean, these are the key ecological processes that that influence many changes that we see in the ecosystems. So, and these 25 sites were networked very well, and they would share the data. That data sharing is paramount, because through that you can cover a larger scale, larger geographical scale, or this spatial scale. So I was, in that context, if you look at, I was telling you about the type of ecological research that we do and the question of scale that, when you think about. So most of the ecological work that we generally here do, spans over a very short span of time. But this long-term ecological research that ranges from months over years to decades to even millennia, at times to century. So you can draw real robust conclusions about a number of issues. For example, how this carbon dioxide concentration has been increasing over a period of time, and what has been its impact, say, on the diversity and the distribution of organisms, right? Or for that matter, many other, say, this ocean upwelling, how it has changed over the period of time, so on and so forth. And then if you have scales more than millennia, for instance, we normally research them through the what you call as the paleoecological approaches, right? We look at the fossil data and the so on and so forth. So the point that I want to say is that this long-term ecological research is quite fundamental for us to look at the causes behind the problems that we witness in our age, such as this pandemic also, for instance. We all talk about the pandemics. In the morning session also, Professor Zafar Saab might have talked about this coronavirus pandemic, as I could see from the title. And if you look at the basic causes, we don't know. Okay, we say that degrading environment is a problem. We say that our fiddling with nature in different ways is a problem, so on and so forth. That is what has changed the balance. But in science, it does not make much sense unless we do not prove this through the hardcore data, so which is very important. So in that context, these LTERs, or the long-term ecological research observatories, they create a very valuable framework for producing that science, which becomes the, what you call as a generalized science, or the major theories of science emerge from this type of generalized. When you cover a larger time scale and a larger spatial scale, the outcomes of that data, has many implications in the context of the generalized or generalizable science, right? And we can basically work out the replicable models for the information sharing. I mean, if you look at the outcome of the LTERs so far, there are so many useful models in the context of biodiversity changes, in the context of environmental changes, for instance, the acid precipitation, which has been possible only through this long-term data collection and sharing, right? And these LTRs, therefore, help us addressing these critical questions about the environmental change across the globe, which is very fundamental. And it is rightly said, I mean, this Vance basically puts it like this. He says that, and at LTRs help us actually understanding the world around us the way we want to understand a picture. For example, if you look at a picture, this on the right side is basically the larger picture. And if you look at this is just a small part of it. If you look at this small part of the picture, what can we infer? Probably nothing. Until and unless we do not see a larger picture, things would not be clear. So larger picture is only possible, right, when we have long-term approaches in place. Otherwise, there would be serious misjudgments due to the absence of this long-term data. Many a times we attribute, for instance, in our scenario also, for example, in our context, local context here, people attribute many changes to the climate change without trying to understand that is there a scientific basis for that or not. For example, we get a warm spell some year or an exceptionally chilling spell the other year, we attribute it to the climate change, right? Do we have the scientific basis to claim that is something which we need to understand. So, and that is possible for us to understand only and only through the long-term ecological research approach, right? So, in that context, if you look at what is the extent of this long-term ecological research observatories and their networks across the world. As of now, there are more than 40 countries which have organized into 5 regional international long-term ecological research programs. As I said, it was started by US in 1980s. And subsequently, the scientists from the rest of the world were sort of inspired in a way, and they encouraged establishing these long-term ecological sites in their respective countries, especially in Europe. It came up after that. And there are some in the many East Asian countries or the Central and South American countries as well. If you look at this global picture, this is the relatively latest one. So for the non-member countries or non-members are concerned, I mean, there's a gap. You see, from the Asian subcontinent especially, and in case of India, for instance, there's nothing, right? So when this long-term ecological research network is, networking, sharing data, collecting data in a collaborative manner on key parameters that are essential for us to predict the future changes and understand at times the past changes as well. And if there's a gap from our area, it's always going to have large implications, right? So, and how does it work actually? If you look at these, I mean, these say for example, Europe, North America, East Asia Pacific countries, some of the East Asia Pacific countries here, the networks or the this is now called as international LTER or ILTER, International Long-Term Ecological Research Network. So if you look at this table here, if you look at the thematic areas for each of the LTR are sometimes different and sometimes kind of overlapping as well. For instance, climate change is looked at by at least these 9, 10 or more than these 10 LTRs, right? Likewise, disturbance and its impacts by 6 or 7 LTRs, right? Biodiversity by many LTRs. Atmosphere, land, air exchange or interaction by many LTRs. But at the same time, since there are specific thematic areas with each LTR, but at the same time, there are such areas in which they share data. And when they share data covering a larger spatial scale, the through that network, it becomes far more easy for us to basically draw reliable generalizations. And those generalizations, actually, their participants become the basis of the ecological theory, right? So this international long-term ecological research platform, I must tell you, is a very important platform for the collaborative research, right? And a question that you can ask is, what type of research is being actually done by the LTERs? Or what type of research actually merits the LTER approach or the long-term ecological research approach? You must understand that, that many ecological processes, they are non-linear, and they are in a kind of non-equilibrium state, and they provide us, I mean, you cannot get a rational conclusion unless we do not have long-term measurements, right? Because they are not always linear in that typical sense of the word. Or for that matter, the ecological phenomena that occur at a very slow speed, at a slow rate, which are very subtle and are at the same time very complex in nature, they cannot be studied in a short time period. They need a long-term ecological research approach, right? For instance, if we want to understand the forest succession, we cannot understand it probably in my lifetime. It needs more generations to understand and keep basically doing. So what basically these LTRs do is, once a site is established, you have certain set parameters, what you are working on, but at the same time, it's very much open. A site which you designate as a long-term ecological research site is pretty much open to any researcher beyond the fields of biology, say from a biophysics background, from a chemistry background, from an organic chemistry background for that matter. They can ask questions and use this site from their own perspectives. And over time, this data will be kind of, accumulating. And when you plot the data after, say, 10 years time, 20 years time, the wonderful, trends that it throws open are otherwise, not possible for us to even think about. So in that context, I mean, this is something very important. So dear participants, in that context, the major mission and objectives of this long-term ecological research, if you want to understand, there are different aspects to it, right? So this is what I have tried to put it, in a stepwise way, right from understanding to synthesis and information dissemination to understanding legacies, training, and outreach. The first and fundamental point is that our understanding becomes better, our conclusions become more robust, and gaining the ecological understanding of a diverse array of ecosystems at multiple spatial scales and the temporal scales is one of the very fundamental objectives of the long-term ecological research, right? And once we understand these things at different, say, spatial scales in a given time frame, it helps us to synthesize the results better. I mean, using the network of sites to create general ecological knowledge is what you call as the synthesis. The real ecological knowledge is synthesized from these long-term observations. And once we have now data with us, after analysis in the form of knowledge, this data has come up with us. And the next important step, basically, that these LTOs generally do, is there in their very design, is the information dissemination. Creating well-designed, documented databases, right? And I mean, this information dissemination through journal articles, through white papers, or through policy documents, so on and so forth. And this is actually what helps the policy planners to take real informed decisions, right? And one of the very important aspects is the understanding of the legacies. I mean, it creates a legacy of well-documented long-term observations, the long-term experiments, right? And it helps us to at times archive better the samples and the specimens, just for the purpose that it would be needed after 10 years down the line. So, I mean, this, legacies, I mean, these long-term ecological research sites leave a legacy, and they create basically such a science which is of real value in the policy design and the policy planning process. And one of the very important aspects that these LTRs are also involved in is the training, right? I mean, the contribution of these go and be correct. I'll keep the video off. So sorry, there was some connection issue. I think it is okay now.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay, sir.
Is it okay? So I have stopped my video. Probably it helps to make this speed better. Anyway, so I think up to this it's very clear. So now I was telling you about the gaps in the Indian context. So for this long-term ecological research is concerned, and it was, of course, a concern with the people actually who are doing this ecology and environmental science research in this country. And almost 10 years back, the discussion started that there should be basically a long-term ecological observatory system in place in the India as well. And the credit goes to this man, Professor Raman Sukumar from the Center of Ecological Sciences, IISc Bangalore, who kind of networked with the people who eventually kept discussing how to basically plan this. And there were a series of meetings and the workshops that were held. And I was fortunately part of this exercise from 2012 onwards. And the science plan for having these long-term ecological research observatories in place, in that sense, there was, if you look at the plan, I can share a draft of that plan, that we need to have these LTOs spread across the country. And major areas, or the landscapes which were, deep that time was Western Himalayas, Eastern Himalayas, because Himalaya as such is a biodiversity hotspot, northwestern arid zones, the central Indian forests, right? Southern Western Ghats, the Western Ghats decided that the long-term set up in each of these, and the piece of which was decided, that it fundamental criteria was the representativeness of the site for the biogeographic zone or the province where we are, placing it. I mean, how representative, for example, if we place a site in the Himalayan context, Kashmir Himalaya or the northwestern Himalaya, Himachal including, right? And for that matter, northeastern Himalaya. So it should cover the whole. So I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry for these internet issues. I thought it works well normally for me with the classes, but today it is giving a tough time. Anyway, so what I was trying to tell you is that if you look at these criteria and the landscapes, they are by and large quite representative at the national scale. So for the India as a country is concerned. And why this Sukumar was instrumental in this, I must tell you that he is the man who has been actually monitoring a long-term site in the Mudumalai forests for more than 28 years now. I think 30 years now. So they established that site in 1988, which is a 5-hectare permanent plot, which was set up by the Center of Ecological Sciences in the tropical forests of Mudumalai, Western Ghats. And 20,000 individuals from these were identified, tagged, and mapped for long-term monitoring over the period of time. And I must thank Sukumar for sharing this slide with me. I mean, last night when I thought that I will be talking about long-term ecological research, I requested him to, give a summary slide of what they have been doing in this Mudumalai forest. And this is what he sent to me. And this more than 30-year, monitoring has helped them getting very useful insights from this long-term monitoring over these 3 decades or so. For instance, the forest is very much prone to disturbance in terms of fires, herbivory, elephant herbivory especially, drought, invasion by the alien species such as Lantana camara, and how these disturbances have been changing over time and what is their impact on the diversity and the distribution of species. There has been significant interannual variation in the regeneration and mortality of trees. That's what if you look at these graphs, for instance, mortality and the recruitment of trees over a long period of time. See what the fluctuations are. So that's what I was telling you, that drawing a conclusion just on the basis of 1 or 2 year study would not be sufficient unless look at the peak here, for instance, in 2006, and then the other years, right? So interestingly, they found that so for the carbon stocks are concerned, those carbon stocks continue to increase over the period of time, right? I mean, look at this biomass, graph of the grasses, woody stems, and so on. So the point that actually I want to tell you here is that in India, a proposal basically after these discussions was submitted to the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change, I think in 2015 or so. And then ministry came up with a call for proposals, asking proposals from the scientists to set up the long-term ecological repositories across the country. And scientists who were interested did submit their proposals. And a good news is that only in the last year, this was finally granted or sanctioned. And there are many of the major programs have been already granted by the ministry, and the work stands already initiated. And one of the networks that I am also a part of, so far this is concerned, is the long-term monitoring of the biodiversity and ecosystem process in the Indian grasslands. So there are around 8 stations spread across the country, and around 9 institutions involved in this. And this is an effort which is led by Dr. Mahesh Sankaran from the NCBS Bangalore, wherein the idea is basically to look at the grassland ecosystems across the country on a long-term basis for changes in terms of, say, species composition, proportion of native versus non-native species, right? How the functional traits of the species change over time corresponding to the environmental changes or the climate change, so on and so forth, right? And so on. I mean, how these grassland systems basically, so for the herbivory or different disturbance regimes, what is their impact on these grasslands? So we are covering in this project a larger environmental gradient across the country. Kashmir Himalayan context, we have an observatory, near the Nachigam forests. So at each of the observatories, we have a site, and at each site you take the initial data, prepare the baseline, and then keep on monitoring over the period of time. Going to work on this. Will data on the key parameters that with her PhD. That the work that is done is dumped in the form of a thesis or some journal article, that's it. But what happens in long term to this site, there could be another student tomorrow who can take this forward. Or for that matter, as I said, these long-term ecological observatories are very open in their nature. I mean, there's an open invitation to any scientist who wants to ask questions from his own perspective. So I'm so sorry again, for these interruptions. I hope you bear with me. So now when we look at this long-term ecological research from an Himalayan perspective, dear participants, Himalaya, as we know, is the biologist's paradise, right? Because it is home to rich and unique biodiversity, be it medicinal plants, be it endemic species, be it wildlife species, be it land races, be it the signature crops and the cultivars that we have here. And we have in the Himalayas, I mean, this is an exceptional kind of attribute that Himalayan landscape has, that you have variation in the altitude and topography. For example, the incident UV radiations, light intensity, humidity, nitrogen fixation. These things change over a very short spatial scale. Within a few meters of elevational range, you have significant changes in these key parameters. And what is their implication on the key parameters, or the what we call as the indicators, is very important. And at the same time, we know that right. So these things make basically this Himalayan region as one of the world's best natural laboratories to study the effect of altitude, climate, and other environmental factors. So far, the animal-plant interactions are concerned, evolution of novel molecules is concerned, impact on the bioresources for that matter is concerned. And unfortunately, as I said, these threats like climate change, biological invasions, land use, land cover changes is something which is pretty much evident there. So the need for having a long-term ecological research plot or system in this region is very, very important, and it's very much there. So now, putting this in context, the participants, if you look at the global level, mountain biodiversity is considered as central to the sustainability agenda, otherwise as well. So that's why the Himalayas come into the play and play a very special role. And recently, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and of course the IPBS and other bodies, even IUCN, they have considered this long-term ecological research approach very essential for ensuring the long-term ecosystem management and biodiversity conservation in the mountain systems, right? And if you look at the mountain biodiversity, so I'm sorry, you must be irritated by this frequent. So I was telling you that a proposal has gone to the CBD recently to fix the targets about, say, invasion management. One of the major threats to the biological invasions, to the biodiversity is the biological invasions, the invasive species. And there is now a framework proposed. By 2030, there have to be targets fixed. Say, for example, by 2030, 50% of the most significant pathways of introduction of these species have to be Okay. So, cover it as quickly as possible, uh, because of these internet issues. What I was basically trying to tell you is that these invasions, if you look at the impact that these have across the globe, they are very different. I mean, they behave very differently in the native and the non-native regions. What we have tried to understand over the period of time is that local flora in their native ranges, but not so in non-native ranges. In that context, in the annual meeting of the American Association. So I'm sorry again for this issue. I had never been having this problem in my classes that I deliver. Type it up as quickly as possible. It's a Christmas card which was shared by our collaborators recently, and actually embedded in this is a data that has been collected from across the world, starting from Montana to Kashmir and Colorado to, many parts of the Europe, Canada, and so on. So what basically I would like to emphasize now on is that in the Western Himalayan context, which is very important, and that is the system where most of us work in our own capacities, could it be possible for us to initiate a comprehensive LTO program also, right? Of course, there is something being sponsored from this central ministries. Can we become part of the LTO programs that are there going on across in the country as of now? And if, in addition to that, can we have a program here as well of which we become part in our own capacities? Say, for example, somebody is working on climate change in terms of the glacial retreat, hydrological shifts, or land use, land cover changes. And somebody is looking at the biological invasions, for instance, us, in terms of habitat disturbances, right? So on, and growing trade and tourism, so on and so forth. Can we basically find the common grounds and use this long-term ecological approach to ask common questions and, the questions at least with the common interfaces? And for instance, somebody is interested in the ecosystem services, be it biodiversity, be it pollination, be it carbon sequestration. That is very important, So overall, we can all basically collaborate and basically become part of this. So what I suggest, therefore, is that this type of a program can focus on tracking the changes in terms of species composition, abundance, or ecosystem process and functions over the time. And we can, through this, advance the science of not only ecology, but the other allied disciplines, right? We can integrate the other fields of science with ecological and environmental sciences, right? And we can, through this, ultimately, at the end of the day, inform the policy-making bodies better for the bioresource management and their conservation on very scientific grounds. How can we do that? I will give you an example here. So, for example, water bodies are very important to us here, be it lakes or the wetlands. What are the possible impacts of the climate change, say, on the wetlands, right? So, principally, there are two very important impacts. The number of functioning wetlands will decline over the period of time. So, for the climate change impact is concerned. And location of certain types of wetlands will shift because some places will become drier and they will no more be there as wetlands. So what do we do? Can we at least have a network of wetlands designated and keep them monitoring in terms of key parameters such as hydrology, invasive species that come up there, the habitability, how their habitability in terms of being breeding grounds for the migratory or the resident birds is concerned. So what we need to actually monitor, for example, hydrology. So we can have simple parameters designated, say, for example, depth, inundation, right, groundwater depletion, or the water quality. How these parameters change over the period of time. If we have 10-year data, 20-year data, and 50-year data, eventually, we can have far more, scientifically grounded, credible policies in place, which are informed through this data. And long-term ecological research is basically an approach for that matter, right? Or for that matter, if we, have to measure the exotic invasions, how the proportion of the alien and the, native species has changed over the period of time. So what can be done? Once we talk about these long-term ecological research approaches, we have to be clear that we separate the anthropogenic and the natural drivers of the changes. Sometimes, an ecosystem can age very naturally as well. For example, if we talk about the Dal Lake or any wetland, because of a very natural succession process, the systems can age and they can convert into an altogether different system. But what happens is, because of the anthropogenic changes, pressures, is that the speed of this change is significantly enhanced, right? For instance, as all the communities experience temporal turnover, one of the biggest challenges is distinguishing the changes that can be attributed to external factors, right? For instance, the anthropogenic activities, when you compare them with the natural factors. That's why in climate change also, there are many factors which contribute to the process of climate change. And there are anthropogenic factors. When we talk about the climate change and human-induced climate change, we have to be very clear about those human drivers. And very important is, if we want to manage our these wetlands and the lakes for that matter, is that we have to reduce these non-climatic stressors. This will significantly increase the ecosystem resilience to the effects of climate change and variability. And network management is very important. So in the Himalayan context, when we look at, as I said, that there are gaps, of course, from the subcontinent as such, or Asian continent as such, in fact, in the subcontinent especially. And then from the Himalayan context, in the Himalayan context, we also do not have many such, efforts being done, except for a few. I mean, in the Himachal, there has been a long-term kind of platform they are trying to lay for the monitoring of the forest ecosystems, right? In the Uttarakhand. And what they do is basically they do this data collection, its synthesis, and then they prioritize areas. This is one of the papers that they have recently published. So, but there is not, I would say, any significant, sort of pan-Himalayan approach there. So before I conclude, in the morning session, you heard about the pandemics. When this pandemic started and we were all locked up in our homes in March, April, and May, there was an article published in Science those days, which talked about the big science approaches to tackle with the problems like pandemics. And in response to one of the articles I wrote, and this is the gist here, that we have to think beyond pandemics and safeguard the Earth's life support system. What actually I meant by that was that the world actually needs to unite in this time of exigency and emergency to find the signatures which connect the global environmental change to the biological invasions and disease outbreaks. Because these pandemics we cannot understand in isolation, right? So what are the causative factors? How is it related to the biodiversity depletion? Right? So can we find those signatures? Can we have long-term approaches in place and collaborative approaches in place, rather innovative approaches in place through cross-border collaboration, which would help us, collecting useful data and sharing that data and the resources, and eventually coming up with an integrated scientific framework on, as they say, One Health kind of framework to guide the global policy and the practice. So for this to happen, there has to be a strong political will to switch from the national to the global solidarity for safeguarding the Earth's life support system. And if we want to do this, LTO programs, dear students, and dear participants, is one of the important ways that holds the promise. So before I conclude, I leave you with this thought, which is by Rachel Carson. You know this very much for his contribution in terms of that historical book. Yes, The Silent Springs. What she said was, the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and the realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for the destruction, right? And with this, you must also keep in mind that this decade, 2021 to 2030, has been designated by the UN as a decade of ecosystem restoration. Previous decades have been the decades of destruction for us. We have been destroying, and destroying. Is this pandemic or the other environmental issues that we have around us now enough to kind of, sensitize us or gear us up for, contributing to this ecosystem restoration? Ecosystem restoration is a very well-grounded science elsewhere. If you look at Europe and the US, for instance, or Canada, they have restored many degraded ecosystems to such a pristine glory. For example, I'm reminded of a river system that I saw in Canada in, I think, 2010 or so. Nobody would ever think that this was ever dried up. I was told that it was dried up for many, many years. And then they basically did their efforts and restore it. So that's how ecosystem restoration works. Or for that matter, these invaded habitats in our Himalayan context. Look at Kashmir Himalayan context. Every road that you travel is invaded by these alien species. Look at Gulmarg, for example. If you go to the Gulmarg, invaded by that Leucanthemum vulgare, the oxydaceae, for that matter. How can we have a restoration effort for such landscapes through the planting of native species. How can we be the part of this as the food for thought in between? With that, I conclude it here. I thank you very much for your patient hearing, and I would be most, I would be glad to answer the questions or queries if there are any. Any questions?
Thanks, Dr. Manzoor Ahmad Shah Sahab, for this thoughtful and comprehensive presentation. We have certain questions in the this chat box. So question number 1 is from Dr. S.M. Zubair, is that in spite of long-term monitoring of dull and rural lakes, we have miserably failed in addressing the issues confronting these valued aquatic resources.
Right.
Needless to mention, a good amount of literature is also available, yet we have not learned from the long-term monitored indicators. What's the way out, sir?
Yeah, it's a very pertinent question. In fact, I mentioned it in a way in my talk as well. The problem is, first of all, if you look at, for example, the Dal Lake, many researchers have worked on it from their own perspective, right? But at the same time, there has not been, unfortunately, any cooperation, collaboration, or crosstalk between the researchers over the time. You would see many a times that two researchers are working on the Dal Lake in the same year. For example, on the water quality, they are coming out with the two different reports, completely different, mismatching data, which is at least, raising some questions also on the credibility of the research that we are doing. That is why I'm telling you that if we would have been handling this Dal Lake, for instance, in terms of understanding as an ecosystem on a long-term basis, there should have been set parameters right from the day one, say, for example, especially some key parameters. So there could be some parameters related to the biodiversity of the lake, some parameters related to the water quality of the lake, some parameters, socio-economic aspects of the lake, some parameters related to the, watershed of the lake, right? And then, how these all, because these factors do not work in isolation in the nature. In nature, they work in jointly, right? Until and unless there is a credible scientific protocol, framework, coordination, and cooperation between the scientists who are working, we cannot expect any reliable results, or for that matter, those results which can, guide the policy framework. So that is where the efforts of restoration of the Wooler Lake or conservation of the Dal Lake have not, probably given us the expected or the desired dividends, either of our flawed understanding. For example, if you look at the management perspective, many a times the lake has been viewed as an engineering system and approached mainly through that dredging and other engineering approaches, when this is an ecosystem which has a very set way of functioning as an ecological system, right? For one small example, I will tell you. One of the weeds or the invasive species that has taken this lake over, one of the species of this nymphia, from the Centaur Hotel almost across this, up to the up to the Hazrat Basin. You will see that Lavda has been employing, to begin with, almost 500 laborers a day to, uproot them. And they did not, meet much success. They could only uproot just a small patch of it. And then they resorted to the mechanical approach as well, but the patch is still there. So my point is, what has brought this species into the system and how this species has been able to reproduce, understanding the basic biology of the species, until and unless we do not have a understanding of this biology of this spreading species, what helps it spread, we cannot basically control it better. So that's why I actually believe that we have not tried to understand these systems as ecological systems over the period of time, and the lack of coordination between the scientists who have been working on it, and of course the absence of any leadership or any this type of a long-term approach from whatever the agencies or the institutions, have all been contributing to the pathetic situation that we ultimately unfortunately witness as of now. And that's where I believe that if we start this long-term approach now, at least, I mean, after 10 years, probably this question would not be there. We will be having a better understanding of the system. I hope it's clear. Zubair Saab. Is it clear?
Sir, there's a second question.
Yes.
From Professor Shaukat Ahmad Pala, that how far you are satisfied with the measures taken by J&K government to preserve its bioresources from depletion and extinction. What sort of advices you recommend to minimize the impact of anthropogenic factors on diversity of Kashmir Himalayas?
Well, these are two questions. One is the bioresources.
Yes.
Shaukat Pala Sahab, I know, has worked on these mushrooms, for instance, which is a very important valuable bioresource. The issue is that, first and foremost, is that do we know our bioresources very well? So for the documentation part of the bioresources concerned, there is some background noise. So what I want to actually say is that we have not been able to scientifically document the bioresources that we have in Jammu and Kashmir, at least, or the Kashmir Himalayan context, if you look at that way. So what are the issues in the documentation part? There are many bioresources which have been documented to some extent, but it's not a kind of systematic way we have been doing it. Second is, whatever has been documented, do we know what its value is and how some value addition could be done? Unfortunately, there are many bioresources which we are not very well aware of, which have a large potential of value addition. For example, these mushrooms, since he has worked on mushrooms, let me talk from that perspective. If you look at these mushrooms from the perspective of the bioactive molecules that they harbor, many of them have exceptionally great attributes in terms of, say, for example, say anti-inflammatory or anti-cancer activities, right? They can be the sources of the potential drugs if we explore them a bit more and then do some value addition. The bioresources that we have in Jammu and Kashmir, unfortunately, are not very well documented. And then, so far the bioprospection is concerned, it only comes next. There have been some attempts on the documentation of the traditional use of some of the bioresources, but that's not enough. The time has come when we should have a comprehensive program on the bioresources of the Himalayas, especially this northwestern Himalayas. And I must share it with you here, that this is the point that we have been arguing many a times with whomsoever we are able to meet in the central the state, say, government or the educational institutions. And recently, DBT had a special session on the bioresource. I'm having a special bioresource program for the northwestern Himalayan region. The way they have it in the eastern Himalayan region. And good news is that they are almost set to basically have this plan out. And we are also, there are many scientists who belong to the institutions across the northwestern Himalayan systems, being it Jammu, Kashmir, Uttarakhand for that matter, Ladakh. They are going to be a part of that. So I hope this program comes up and there is a comprehensive, basically, program of documenting, bioprospecting, value adding the bioresources for the better, regional economy and the contribution to the local livelihoods. If that program kicks off well and is a success, I hope that these things would change, and we are all there to kind of support it. And that's what our Vice Chancellor has supported it in that meeting, and many other heads of the institutions of other institutions here also have supported it like anything. So we are looking forward to that program hopefully soon, and I hope that makes some difference there. I hope it answers your question, Shakut Saab.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is another question from Dr. S.M. Zubair Saab, that if we believe that Moss has said that lake, if left to itself, has a tendency to revert back to its original trophic level, even if researchers are not cross-linked, there's a bit of responsibility with us as well. I mean, stakeholders need to contribute towards reviving the pristine glory of the lake.
Yes, I mean, you see, the point is here of the perception as well. We have to have the right perception about these systems. Zubair Saab is probably under this impression that the perception that he has about the lake, everybody has that perception, which is not a fact. I must share, I share this anecdote quite often in when we have such of discussions. Way back in 2000 or so, we were working in a project through SCOST, the Ministry of Environment and Forests was supporting that, on this Hokasar wetland. And once we asked a very old man who was on the banks of the wetland, just out of curiosity, once what do you think about this wetland? Yes. He said that this is what caught our attention, and we sat for a discussion with him. So his perception about the system probably was not what it should have been. That's exactly the problem with the Dal Lake also. If you go into the Dal Lake, you have the communities living in the Dal Lake. This is just of last year only. One of the directors of this A3 was with me, and there were other guests. We were kind of riding in the Dal Lake with regard to some project activity. And there was a student, in fact, he was coming back from the school in that boat, Shikara, and he had the chocolate and then ultimately put that wrapper and other things into the bin. And this man asked him, beta kyun kya hai aisa? He seemed to be clueless. What is the implication of this? My point is, we need a lot of work. There's a lot of scope for us to, first of all, change the perception of the stakeholders about the value of these ecosystems. For example, this Dal Lake, if you look at the Dal Lake, look at the economic goods and the ecosystem services that it gives to us. We get nadru, we get fish, we get all these vegetables you see in the Dargah market in the morning every year. It primarily comes from the Dal Lake. These are the economic goods, fine enough. But then look at the existential value of this lake. If this lake would not have been there, imagine the Srinagar city without the Dal Lake, right? So, and then look at the ecosystem services such as, for example, if recreational value, that cultural value that it has. Until unless we do not start with a strong campaign right from the school level up to the highest possible level, and also engaging with the stakeholders like, say, Mohalla committees, and kind of to change the perception. Once the perception is changed, then, for example, out with the government also has an altogether different perception. I don't think they have a right perception of this lake as an ecological system. They would like to see it always with that crystal clear water. They would not actually understand that some of the aquatic plant species that grow is a very important part of the system per se. So my point is, these perceptions need to be changed at various levels, and all of us can be part of that, process of changing the perceptions at the outset. Number one. Number second is that there has to be some sort of, goal-oriented programs. So, for example, if I ask the Lauda or the lake managers as of now, or any government agency or any other agency for that matter, or even for a scientist. So what would you ultimately like this lake to be? Is there a reference system with us? Say we want this lake 10 years after or 20 years after this, the water quality should be this, catchment should be this, houseboats have to be managed this way. Probably we do not have that sort of a blueprint also clearly with us. Do we want to conserve it for the tourism purposes? Do we want to conserve it for the biodiversity that it holds or harbors? Do we want to conserve it for some other values? Or we want to conserve it for all of these? So the point is that there are many ambiguities with us so far these systems are concerned. And that is where, I mean, when it comes to the management of these water bodies, our policies miserably fail because they are not grounded in the realities. And that is where I was telling you, from a scientific perspective, we are not having a long-term scientific database of key parameters on the basis of which we could take a reliable decision. That is one. Second is, say, for example, there's a policy with the government to rehabilitate the dull dwellers into the places like, say, Rakhyart, which is on the banks of this Hokersar wetland, right? If you look at that plan, that has miserably failed, I must tell you. I mean, many families have been, say, shifted, but they have not been given any alternative livelihood. And those who live in the Dal Lake, basically for them, Dal Lake is a livelihood. They do that fishing activity, they do the Natru activity, they do the other cultivation activities. And elsewhere, they do not have any alternative livelihood. So they spend night there. In the day, they come back to the Dal Lake for this activity. And in a family, if there were 4 members, 3 have been shifted, 1 was there. And that one member is now again 3-4 members after 4-5 years. So, right? So my point is these misplaced priorities, this lack of coordination, this lack of scientific basis to take a decision, overall, all these factors are responsible for this. And now the question is, how can we become the part of the solution? That's why I'm telling you, in this, for example, gathering, each one of us, since we are in the education institutions, giving a message about these systems, giving a message about the ways we can become part of the solution rather than the part of problem, and then creating a real good platform for that perceptual shift is something that we can do in our humble capacity as teachers. But at the same time, we can put our opinions across through different, say articles or policy papers to the government or the agencies that can be of help in this. So I think that is the way to go. And then I must tell you that one very important thing is that we need to learn from the practices from elsewhere as well. For example, there are many success stories of ecological restoration, as I said, from the developed world. Say, for example, so can we learn from that? Can we bring some of the success stories back home here and basically try to implement them and see that if that makes any change? And I'm sure that will. So that is there. Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Sir, there's a question, another question. If you allow, sir, there are a number of questions. This from participant side.
I think we have time, so I have absolutely no issues. I can answer as many questions as you want.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. There's a question from Professor Sayar Ahmed from Government Degree College, Kulgam, that is there any recent bathymetric map of Dal Lake available with us? As per that map, how much area of this lake has been encroached? Please, sir.
This is a good question again. I was basically part of the scientific advisory committee of the Lakes and Waterways Development Authority for few years back, and having a bathymetric map was time and again, advised by that committee, but unfortunately, there was not, I don't think in that period of time, we could see any. The issue is, if you look at the flow of water in the Dal Lake over the period of time, one of the important sources of water to the Dal Lake has been the groundwater springs, right? And over the time, those groundwater springs have been chopped, right? So because of that, what has happened is, and then, as I said, this lake has been approached mainly through the engineering approaches. Dredging has been going on in the lake for quite a while now. And this dredging has changed that, bathymetry of the lake in such a way that the natural water flow patterns that used to be there historically, they have changed quite a lot. Those patterns, and having a bathymetry map is very important. Unless you don't have that, you cannot basically come up with a credible, strategy how to basically restore the flow, and especially the flushing rates, how much is coming in, how much is going out, hydrological budgeting, so on and so forth. So they are not possible. So I have not seen a recent bathymetric map of the lake. And if you look at the area that has been encroached upon, this has been the point of debate in many of the meetings. Lauda claims that the area of the lake, what was there 25 years or 30 years before, mentioned by in some documents, the revenue records of the government or so, whatever, the lake is exactly almost the same. They don't say, they don't agree to this, it has been encroached. This is one part of the story. But the other part of the story is, this is what you and me see on everyday basis. When we travel from, say, either the foreshore, not mainly the foreshore, from this, for example, from Dalgate to the Hazardbal through the Renavari route, there are visible encroachments. There are many structures which were not there 2 years before, but they are there now. There are very typical ways with these people to encroach. I mean, how they first lay those sort of logs of wood, and then they kind of in the waters, and then they keep on adding this stuff into it so that it kind of sterilizes that way. So the change, what has been there in the Dal Lake in terms of encroachment, I mean, nobody can deny that there has not been a change. But the Lauda's take is that, as per the government records, whatever its area was, whatever was that 25 or so of those square. I mean, that is it. But the fact of the matter is, yes, I mean, without bathymetry, having a real assessment of the changes is not possible.
Sir, there is a next question from
Yes.
Dr. S.M. Zubair, that perception changes with the awareness. Has people like you failed to reach out the people for developing a sort of different perception that is required for the conservation of valued Dal Lake? I must say, one wetland lost is equal to one civilization lost. Dal is another designation of Srinagar. Sir, please.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, Dal Lake is very important. Nobody denies its importance. But at the same time, we have to also understand that many other ecosystems are also equally important. For example, the grassland systems, the forest ecosystems, right? The ecosystem services which are rendered by the ecosystems that we are talking about, say, for example, the Dal Lake or the wetlands, they are invaluable in a way. I mean, we can value these economic goods, but we cannot value these ecosystem services, right? So regarding perception, I agree with him that collectively we have failed in building the right perception, right? Question is, should we be debating the same question again next year and year after year? How can we become the part of the solution? Whatever, for instance, me in my humble capacity as a researcher or as a teacher is possible, I have been doing. So, for example, on the Dal Lake, we did a study a few years back, which was sponsored by the UNDP in collaboration with the A3 Bangalore, taking into account 6 major aspects of the lake, and there were, special, specialized groups on each of these areas, like watershed, water quality, biodiversity, socio-economic aspects, so on and so forth. And in that report, I would be more than happy to share that report with Zubair Saab and other participants who are interested. In that report, we have clearly documented the issues that are there. And we have also, suggested the short-term, mid-term, and the long-term measures which are required. And I must tell you, that study was actually done on the behest of the then state government, request to the UNDP. And then it was to be shared with the state government. Unfortunately, given the twists and turns that have happened over the period of time, uh, after the report was ready, it was not discussed with the, I mean, at a desired level for the next follow-up action, right? But I believe that report is still a very baseline document for the government as of now to act upon. And there, if the issues that we have raised, for example, there, and the issues that we have, the strategies that we have suggested there, if they are taken up seriously by the government, I'm pretty sure that will make a change. For instance, one of the things that was suggested was to creation of the green fund, and creating a broader, level of skills in the people who live in the lake, so that they can have alternative livelihoods. And how do we do that? That was also mentioned there. And then many other things, are there in that report. So each one of us has to work in our own capacities, whatever is possible. But at the same time, beyond these individual efforts, the efforts at the institutional level, the community level, at the government level, I mean, there has to be synergies between these efforts. And until and unless we are not basically working ourselves as the agents of change in terms of our intellectual contributions, in terms of our other contributions, I mean, we cannot expect others to change the system for us. So I endorse Zubair Saab's view, and I believe that yes, it is our collective responsibility, and we have to be with the part of the solution collectively. So
Thank you so much, sir. Although there was some internet connectivity problems between this presentation.
I'm really sorry for that.
But no, sir. But in spite of that, it was very thoughtful and comprehensive presentation, rather lecture, in which, sir, you described about the long-term ecological research, or long-term this LTER, which are very much this important to understand the present and predicting the future, or these are this process of ecological systems at multiple spatial scales, or in other words, you said that this LTER is a generalizable science and is a replicable model for information sharing, addressing critical issues about environmental change across the globe. So you also described these different aspects of this long-term ecological research, that it creates general ecological knowledge, that it creates well-designed document databases, that it is well-documented long-term observation experiments and archives of sample and specimens, and at the end, that knowledge to broaden ecological community, general public, resource managers, and policymakers. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time for this throwing light on these long-term ecological research, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Now I request, sir, Dr. Geer Saab, that if he'll allow me to call on the participant presentation, sir. Thank you, sir, so much. Now I request from the participant presentation, I request Dr. Shaukat Ahmed Ganai, who is in Department of Clinical Biochemistry as an assistant professor in University of Kashmir, sir, to start his presentation, sir. Before that, I want to briefly introduce him, that he has done PhD from University of Department of Biochemistry, University of Kashmir, sir, and he has almost 10 years of teaching experience. He has completed 4 PhD students, and 6 MPhil students are awarded under his guidance. So he has published almost 60 national and international papers. He has been the reviewer of different journals like Pharmacology, Human Journal and Experimental Toxicology, Pharmaceutical Biology, Journal of Medicinal Plant Research, Journal of Herbal Medicine. Sir, I will not take so much time between you and the participants. Sir, please, I request Dr. Shaukat Ahmed Ganai, sir, please start your presentation, sir. Dr. Shaukat Ahmed Ganai, sir.
Yes. I'm not able to upload the presentation because Dr. Manzoor Saab is still there.
I request Dr. Manzoor Ahmed Shah, sir, that please stop this presentation, the screen, so that Dr. Shaukat Ahmed Ganai will be in a position to share the screen now.
Is it visible there? Hello? Hello? Am I audible? Okay, thank you, thank you. So, I want to discuss, my topic is the oxidative stress. This is the research of my field. My research field is on oxidative stress. So I want to discuss what this oxidative stress is and how this oxidative stress is generated inside the body, and how the body, once the oxidative stress is generated inside the body, how the body overcomes with this oxidative stress. So actually what happens is that the free radical generation, these free radicals, they are the unstable chemical species which are generated inside our body in a normal manner. So our body can generate these free radicals normally. So these free radicals, once they are by different these mechanisms, by different types of metabolic reactions, by means of the electron transport chain, these free radicals are normally generated inside our body. So once these free radicals are generated inside our body, and our body has a mechanism that it can remove them, it can scavenge them, it can control them. So these free radicals, once they are to be generated in such a concentration that our body defense mechanism is not able to remove them. So at that stage, we say that it's an oxidative stress. The generation of free radicals, sometimes it is to be, there is a accumulation of these free radicals inside the body cells. Once these free radicals, they are generated in a very high concentration, and body defense mechanism is not able to neutralize and eliminate them, we say that it is an oxidative stress. So on one side, that these free radicals, one is they are to be, they are highly unstable, they are reactive. So once they are to be synthesized, they are so unstable that they can abruptly attack the neighboring molecules, the neighboring biomolecules inside the body. So on one side, they are highly damageable. But on the other side, that these free radicals, they are to be generated inside our body, they have a very important function inside our body. The functions that, like that, we have different types of these bacteria. Once they enter into our body, or these different foreign agents, once they enter into our body, these free radicals, they play a very important role to remove them, to kill them, these bacteria. Like that bacteria, some bacteria, they are highly resistant with the innate type of immune system. They are highly resistant with the cell mediated immune system. So these bacteria, they are to be removed, they are to be killed by means of these free radicals. That is what that free radicals, they are generated inside our body. So these free radicals, they play a very important role by removing these bacteria which are resistant, which are very, they are not to be removed by means of the phagocytosis, they are not removed by means of these cell mediated different cells present inside our body, security cells. So they are to be removed by means of these free radicals. So different types of free radicals which are to be generated inside our body. Like that, we have superoxide radical. We have a H2O2, that is a hydrogen peroxide. We have the hydroxyl radical. These free radical, among these free radicals, if we look on this hydroxyl radical, inside the cell, this hydroxyl radical is to be generated from the H2O2, that is the hydrogen peroxide. But cell does not allow the H2O2 to be converted into the hydroxyl radical. This hydroxyl radical, it is so reactive, its lifespan is so less that abruptly once it's to be generated, it can attack the any biomolecule that is present in its vicinity. Especially the DNA is the DNA is to be abruptly attacked by this hydroxyl radical. So cells try to they did not allow the H2O2 to be converted into the hydroxyl radical. So this, we have different types of these mechanisms that we will discuss later on. But before that, outside the cell, if you look upon the blood, in blood this H2O2 is to be generated, and it is to be converted into the hydroxyl radical. But in the blood we have a mechanism. Inside the cell we have no mechanism, but outside the cell we have the mechanism that is responsible to remove this hydroxyl radical. Like that, we have we say that we have to maintain the glucose level from 80 to 100 normal level. So this glucose, which is to be there, the glucose normal level of glucose, it is now we found that this glucose molecule is one of the strong scavenger of this hydroxyl radical outside the cell. And we have the urea on the uric acid that is to be present in a normal level in the blood. This is also to be act as a very strong hydroxyl radical scavenger. So these free radicals, these different types of free radicals which are to be generated, we have our body have a very strong mechanism in to remove these free radicals like that. And before that, these free radicals, they are to be found that they can damage the biomolecules, that they can damage the lipids, so they can damage the cells, they can damage the proteins, they can damage the DNA molecule, and they can also damage these carbohydrates. So lipids, which are highly vulnerable with these free radicals, which are present in the cell membrane, so they are responsible to damage the cells there. Proteins are also. So once the protein is to be damaged, different types of these diseases are to be associated with these. We can also have different types of cancers which are also associated with the free radicals. So DNA is to be damaged there, and carbohydrates are to be also damaged by means of these free radicals. So these free radicals, once they are to be generated inside our body, different types of diseases are to be associated with them. Like that, we have the atherosclerosis, we have the diabetes, we have the aging, we have the cancer, we have the Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, which are to be associated with the protein damage. And then we have the autoimmune disorders, also Down syndrome. So in addition to that, we have the inflammation, we have the rheumatoid arthritis. These are also responsible for they are also to be caused by means of the free radical damage. So these free radicals we have, but our body have a mechanism. Our body have a mechanism that they can scavenge these free radicals by means of the different ways. Like that, the compounds, the agents which are responsible to remove these free radicals, we call them as the antioxidants. We have two types of antioxidant system in our body. That is one, that is the enzymatic antioxidants. We have some of these enzymes which are enzymatic in nature, which are responsible for the removal of these free radicals. Like that, we have a superoxide dismutase, one of the strong free radical scavenger of the superoxide radical. Then we have the catalase, a very strong enzyme that is responsible to remove the H2O2 and convert this H2O2 into the water molecule. And it is to be found that within the nucleus, that 10,000 molecules of the H2O2 are to be found to hit the DNA molecule within 1 second. So that means how much that the concentration of this H2O2 is to be synthesized, that the 10,000 molecules of this DNA, these H2O2 molecules can hit the DNA molecule within 1 second. But this catalase, it's a very strong free radical scavenger, especially this H2O2, and converts this H2O2 into the water molecule. Then this we have, but there are some, they are cell specific, they are present in different cell organ. These cells, they are present in the blood as well, like the superoxide dismutase, it is present in a very less concentration in the blood. So catalase, it is a mitochondrial enzyme, which we have the electron transport chain, because electron transport chain is the main chain which is responsible for the generation of these free radicals. And this glutathione reductase and S transferase, they are also the enzymes which are responsible for the scavenging of these free radicals. So these are the enzymatic ones, which are responsible for the scavenging of these free radicals. In addition to these enzymatic, we have the non-enzymatic ones also. These non-enzymatic, one of the best non-enzymatic, that is the glutathione, a very small protein, 3 amino acid protein, only 3 amino acid protein. That is the glutathione, which is to be found a very strong free radical scavenging. Then we have the alpha tocopherol, vitamin E. It's a very strong free radical scavenging. Then we have the ascorbic acid and some synthetic ones, like that we have the beta hydroxytoluene, we have a beta hydroxyaniline, and these are also the very strong free radical scavengers. So these free radicals, I've already told you that they are on one side, they play a very important role. They can increase our immune system. That means they are responsible for the killing of the various type of the bacteria. These bacteria which are resistant against the innate and the immune system. And then we have these on the other hand, they are very damageable if they are to be generated in a very high concentration. But these are very strong. And these we have these enzymatic and non-enzymatic these free radical scavengers, which these which can be used as a scavenger of these free radicals. So among last we have these plant flavonoids. Plant flavonoids are to be found that they can be very important, these free radical scavengers. This is our research of field, that these plant flavonoids, they play a very important role in the scavenging of these free radicals. These different types of plants are to be used there, especially one of the plant that is to be used for what we call as the these beautification of lawns, that we have used in our lab in collaboration with the Kansas Medical Institute USA, that this Elsia rosa, and this is to be found, it's a very strong free radical this an anti-cancerous plant, especially the colorectal cancer. This plant has been seen that it is a very strong anti-cancerous plant, and we have that paper. Our paper has been published in the carcinogenesis, and then recently one of our paper has been published in the Journal of Inflammation Research, that Kosha and Thompson, that we have used against this inflammation. It's a very strong free radical scavenge, these anti-inflammatory plant that is to be we have also used. In addition to some other plants that are to be used, especially the plants from our Kashmir Valley, that these plants, they have very strong free radical scavenging activity, or the free radical associated these diseases. So these like we have other plants that we have also used to show the very strong free radical scavenging activities, that they have a very strong free radical scavenging activities, these plants. So that is overall that these plants, they are to be used, because we are going to isolate the molecule, especially from the Elsia rosa, that the molecules are responsible for the scavenging. We are in process to isolate these molecules that can be used in future, inshallah, for the therapeutic against the cancer. So thank you very much. So Ayaz Saab. Any questions? Ayaz Saab.
Que hoje. Ai. Ai. चलो कोशिश करके ना हाँ अच्छा चलो अभी आप आओगे अच्छा ये आएंगे अच्छा चलो
We can have another participant presentation. Ayaz Saab, can you hear me? Abid Saab, please mute yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Shaukat Ahmad Ganai Saab, for this brief presentation. Now, sir, we have time. I think, sir, we will request another participant to have another presentation, sir.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Sir, I think Professor Zafar Ayub Shah is ready. I think he was talking to me. He was talking to me on phone that I am ready for presenting this presentation.
Let him present.
I think if he is listening to me, then he can present. He can share the screen.
Yes, I am, sir. Are you listening, sir?
Yes. Please, sir, share the screen, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Please.
Is my screen visible? Yes, sir.
Yes. Your screen is quite visible now. You can start now.
Dear participants, Assalamu alaikum all of you. I am Zafar Ayub Shah, Assistant Professor Chemistry, Government Degree College, Kulgam. I will deliver talk on green chemistry.
I think Zafar Sab has some. Oh, okay.
Yes, you can solve.
Yes, you can start.
Green chemistry, as we are aware, that it is the utilization of a set of principles that reduce or eliminate the use or generation of hazardous substances in the design, manufacture, and application of chemical products. Green chemistry is about waste minimization at source, use of catalysts in place of reagents, using non-toxic reagents, use of renewable resources, improved atom efficiency, use of solvent-free or recyclable, environmentally benign solvent systems. Green chemistry is about reducing. We should reduce waste, reduce material usage, reduce hazard, risk, energy, and cost. Why do we need green chemistry? There is no deny to the fact that chemistry plays an important role in our daily lives. Chemical development is also bringing new environmental problems and harmful unexpected side effects, which result in the need for greener chemical products. A famous example is the pesticide DDT, which is non-biodegradable and has posed a challenge to our environment. Green chemistry looks at pollution prevention on the molecular scale and is an extremely important area of chemistry due to the importance of chemistry in our world today and the implications it can show on our environment. The green chemistry program supports the intention of more environment-friendly chemical processes which reduce or even eliminate the generation of hazardous substances. This program works very closely with the 12 principles of green chemistry. The 12 principles of green chemistry are as prevention, atom economy, less hazardous chemical synthesis, designing safer chemicals, safer solvent and auxiliaries, design for energy efficiency, use of renewable feedstock, reduce derivatives, catalysis, design for degradation, real-time analysis for pollution prevention, inherent safer chemistry for accident prevention. It is better to prevent waste than to treat or clean up waste after it is formed. Chemical process first, it leads to generation of waste, we should say no to it, but another chemical process, it generates no waste, we should say yes to it. This is a classical route for synthesis of a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, ibuprofen. Look how many byproducts are generated through classical route. If we follow this route, least amount of byproducts get generated. That should be the approach of a chemist while designing synthesis. The use of auxiliary substances, for example, solvents, suppression agents, etc., should be made unnecessary wherever possible and innocuous when used. A solvent-less reaction, for example, solid A and solid B, when combined, grind them, it gives a quantitative yield solid C. Energy requirement should be recognized for their environmental impacts and should be minimized. Synthetic methods should be conducted at ambient pressure and temperature. If we go through ordinary route and we generate carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it leads to global warming. This is the synthetic route for the generation of polylactic acid, which is a polyester and is used for the synthesis of fibers, films, thermofrosting, bottles, wovens, and etc. If we follow this route, we generate least amount of waste products, and that is the good approach for synthesis of polylactic acid for plastic production. Another approach for synthesis of polyhydroxyalkanoates, which are nowadays important and are used in medicinal industry for generation of biothread. And if we follow this route, but it is a safer route. Here we generate less amount of waste, and the plastic product finally generated is biodegradable in nature. The major uses of green chemistry are energy, global change, resource depletion, food supply, toxics in the environment. Energy. The vast majority of the energy generated in the world today is from non-renewable sources that damage the environment, like carbon dioxide, depletion of ozone layer, effects of mining, drilling, etc., and toxics. Energy. Green chemistry will be essential in developing the alternatives for energy generation, photovoltaic cells, hydrogen fuel cells, bio-based fuels, as well as continue the path towards energy efficiency with catalysis and product design at the forefront. Global change. Concerns for climate change, ocean temperature, stratospheric chemistry, and global distillation can be addressed through the development and implementation of green chemistry technologies. Due to overutilization of non-renewable resources, natural resources are being depleted at an unsustainable rate. Fossil fuels are a central issue. Resource depletion. Renewable resources can be made increasingly viable technologically and economically through green chemistry, biomass, nanoscience, and technology like solar, carbon dioxide, chitin, and waste utilization. Food supply. While current food levels are sufficient, distribution is adequate. Agricultural methods are unsustainable. Future food production intensity is needed. Green chemistry can address many food supply issues like pesticides, which only affect target organisms and degrade the innocuous byproducts. Fertilizers and fertilizer adjuvants that are designed to minimize usage while maximizing effectiveness. Methods of using agriculture wastes for beneficial and profitable uses. Toxics in the environment. Substances that are toxic to humans, the biosphere, and all that sustains it are currently still being released at a cost of life, health, and sustainability. One of the green chemistry's greatest strength is the ability to design for reduced hazard. Pollution prevention hierarchy. If we treat it, recycle it, reuse it, and prevention and reduction, and we are approaching towards the green chemical approach. Conclusion. Green chemistry is not a solution to all environmental problems, but the most fundamental approach to preventing pollution. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Zafar Sahab, for this brief introduction about this green chemistry, in which you discussed about the 12 principles of green chemistry and the use of this non-renewable resources, etc., etc. Now, I request among the participants that there is any question from any participant to Professor Zafar Ayub Shah. I think there is no question in the chat box about this green chemistry. So therefore, I think we should conclude this session 8, sir. I request Dr. Ishaq Geer Saab, please, sir, hold the floor, sir, please.
First of all, thank you very much, Professor Ayaz Saab. Thank you very much for moderating it very well. First of all, I would like to request Dr. Zafar Ayub Shah Saab that he is going to be the moderator for tomorrow's session. Dr. Zafar Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So tomorrow you are going to be the moderator for one of the sessions, and
yes, sir, morning session,
and a rapporteur for the afternoon session.
Morning session or afternoon session, sir?
Please take it from
session.
Yeah, so rapporteur of afternoon session.
You will be moderator for the session and rapporteur of the afternoon session.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.